It was on Valentine's Day. Okay. Very romantic. And I was in the toilet paper aisle because I did have diarrhea. What a dream to have diarrhea on Valentine's Day. Mwah. And all of a sudden, this has never happened to me before, I fainted. So when I black in, there are two people standing over me, an old lady and a very attractive gentleman. And the old lady's like blocking him and she's like, "You're okay. Everything's okay." And I'm like, "Bitch, no, I'm not okay. You're standing between me and my future husband." So finally she moves and it turns out that the young hottie is the EMT. And he's like touching my head and he's asking me all these questions. He's like, "What's your name? Do you know what day it is? Where do you live?" And I'm like, okay, wow. He is obsessed with me. He's like, "When's the last time you ate?" I'm like, oh my God, he is about to ask me out to dinner on Valentine's Day. His next question was, "Are you on any medications?" And I was like, okay, yes, I'm on birth control, but I'm not that easy. That is the second date question. We get to the hospital. He rolls me up next to this person who's definitely on drugs. And I turn around to see where he went and he's gone. Here's the moral of the story. Men are pigs and they will string you along and they will break your heart on Valentine's.
Story time. My boyfriend and I bought a very old house. He was in charge of bringing in all the furniture and doing the heavy lifting while I was on wallpaper removal duty. The previous owner had papered every wall and ceiling. Removing it took ages but was oddly satisfying, kind of like peeling skin when you get sunburnt. I started peeling the paper away and discovered that under a corner section of paper in every room was a person's name and a date. Curiosity got the better of me, and one night I googled the names. I discovered that the person was actually a missing person, and the missing date matched the date under the wallpaper. We immediately notified the police and they sent out a crime scene team. After looking around a bit, they came up to me and said, "Where's the wallpaper you removed from the walls?" Turns out it wasn't wallpaper. I'm done.
In high school, I had a friend who lived in this old, small apartment building. And on the first floor was this old guy named Dave who had apparently lived in the building forever. And no one really knew what Dave's deal was. The only time people saw him is when he walked outside to walk his tiny dog. But other than that, he never left his apartment. He had a nephew who delivered him groceries once a week. My friend just assumed that Dave was too old or had some sort of sickness that prevented him from leaving the house. One day my friend was coming home from school and Dave's nephew was leaving the apartment building. And my friend is really sweet, so she was like, "Hey, I know Dave sometimes has troubles getting out of the house, so if you ever need me to go over there and bring him something, let me know. I'm always happy to help." And the nephew looked really shocked and terrified. He was like, "No, you should never go over to Dave's ever." And then he got really awkward and he was like, "Okay, gotta go, bye." And then a few weeks later, my friend was coming home from a Halloween party late at night. And when she got inside her apartment building, Dave's door on the first floor was wide open. And it was pitch black inside his apartment. But then she heard something behind her.
Story time. So just when I thought dating couldn't get any worse, surprise, it did. I went on this date. It was like a FaceTime date the other night with this guy, and it was going okay at first. It was a little bit awkward, but it was fine. Pretty soon into the date, he asked me what my type was. And I said, well, I don't really have a type. Like, all my exes are pretty different, which is true. And then I asked him what his type was. He looked me straight in the eyes and said to me, "Well, normally I go for really strong, motivated, and independent women, but they're all pretty heartless. So I'm trying something different." Excuse me, bitch?
This is why you should always watch videos to the end. In 2003, a woman came home to her apartment to see that her door was unlocked. She went inside, nothing was missing, so she assumed she must have left it open. When it happened a few more times, but still nothing was missing in her apartment, she went out and got a camera, set it up in her apartment aimed at the front door. The next day, her door was unlocked, so she reviewed the footage. She watches in horror as late in the night, her front door opens and in walks this tall, creepy man who looks around and then walks towards her bedroom off camera. She immediately sprints out of her apartment and calls the police, who show up and tell her to go back in her apartment and just try to stay calm, and that they would put an officer right outside her door so she's safe. As she's sitting on the bed, totally traumatized, she realizes something. She only saw him enter her apartment on that video. She doesn't know if he actually left. As she's sitting there, she feels breathing on her ankles. She runs out, the cop comes in, and he finds the tall, creepy man under the bed holding a knife and a camera.
Storytime, my boyfriend tried to kill me so he could have my life insurance money. So I decided to go on Tinder to look for some potential matches. And lo and behold, a guy named Jared was there. He was adorable, he was charming, and we had multiple cell phone calls before deciding to meet. We met at Red Lobster and it was like fireworks. He was so romantic and looked like a 6-foot-something cowboy. He took me to a wildlife bird refuge after dinner and I instantly fell for him. We dated for months and everything was mostly good. However, he was just very pressuring for things. And I didn't want to take things too fast. I was 21 and he was 31. Eventually, this just gave me some bad vibes, so I decided to cut off the relationship. But a few months later, he called me saying that he couldn't forget me. He had been married before and his wife had passed away, so I felt very sympathetic towards him. He had a really nice job, making over $150K a year, and he said that all he wanted to do was take care of me and my child. So I moved in and things were good again. I would wake up in the morning, he would make me coffee, and I would help him with his kids. But I noticed that my weight was starting to go down. And that's when I realized he was putting something in my coffee. Follow me on Insta and stay tuned for part 2. Part 2 to my boyfriend trying to kill me to get my life insurance money. I was not feeling very well and my parents were extremely worried about me, especially once they found out I only weighed 88 pounds. I knew I had to have been really, really ill, so my parents drove down 5 hours to rescue me, and I was immediately hospitalized. That's when I was able to put together the full story on what was going on. He started putting all the money that he was making into my bank account, but he didn't let me have access to it. He would take out loans in my name, making it look like I was making money. And my life insurance policy added to $500,000. During this time in the hospital, I was going through severe withdrawals from whatever he was putting into my coffee. But the second I stopped drinking it, I started to gain weight back. I was thinking that maybe he had done this to his previous wife. However, when I looked her up, I found out that she was still alive. They were just divorced. Later, I was able to find out that they even moved back in with each other. Make sure you don't ever get too blinded by love to realize that you're being taken advantage of. Follow me on Instagram, and if you have a story, DM me. Storytime, how I catfished the girl that my brother-in-law was cheating with. So my brother-in-law always had a bit of a cheating reputation, and he definitely gave me the worst vibe. He had even cheated on my sister before, but they forgave each other and worked things out. Whatever. But I knew that something was up once rumors started to fly again. And so did my sister. And there was one particular girl on his phone that was very sus. So my sister got the number and we decided to set her up. We didn't really know how much she knew or if she was aware that he was married, so we just pretended to be him and asked her to come over. And since they had been hooking up, she was down to come over. So we sat and waited, and she walked in expecting to see my brother-in-law, but instead she got my sister and I. When I say she was shocked, I mean she was shocked. She wasn't furious or anything, however, she kept acting weird like it was all a big joke. She was like, oh my god, I had no idea he was married, which you can't blame her for everything, it takes two to tango. However, I still think you should be aware of who you're seeing. But she agreed to confront him with us. Follow me on Instagram and stay tuned for part 2. Part 2 on how I catfished the girl that my brother-in-law was cheating with. So he was still at the house, just hanging out upstairs, had no idea what was going on downstairs when we invited over the girl. And once she agreed to confront him, we decided to walk on upstairs. So she walked up and literally called this man by his first name. And he denied knowing her. Like, we were in shock. Like, we caught you. Like, here she is. How are you even going to deny that you know her when she's calling you by your first name? But she just kept laughing and he just kept denying it. It was extremely uncomfortable and super weird. She literally knew everything about him and even walked over and tried to be like all cutesy with him. And still, he denied. So we just ended up making her leave and I literally fought this man. My sister was upset and shocked, but I was way more furious than she was. It's one thing for people to hurt you, but not the people that you love. Luckily, she is done and no longer with him. At the end of the day, we need to know our self-worth and set high standards for the people that we're dating. Follow the girl that sent me this story and add me on Instagram and DM me if you have a story of your own. Story time. Someone tried to murder me on a school trip. So during my senior year, I started talking to this guy that we can call Tyler. And we all had to go on a school trip for a competition. During this, we had to stay in a hotel room and we were all assigned partners. Well, I didn't know this at the time, but I was actually assigned Tyler's ex-girlfriend. We can call her Penny. And when I found out she was his ex, I was like, you know what? Not a big deal. I'm probably just overthinking it, but she had a reputation for being psychotic. And I mean psychotic. Since we were all in close quarters, it didn't take her long to figure out that I was talking to her ex, and she went crazy on me. She basically threatened me by saying that if she ever saw me with him again, I wouldn't be coming home to my family. I still honestly didn't take her that seriously until the next day she saw us kissing, and she left the hotel room to buy throwing knives for when I got back. So when I reached the hotel room that day, she was yelling at me, threatening me, and then she took out one of the knives. Stay tuned for part 2 and follow me on Insta.